This is our second section of notes in our Unit 8 on ecology. Today we're going to talk about energy flow through ecosystems. As you know, individuals need energy for growth, reproduction, and survival. There are two strategies that have evolved to regulate energy acquisition and metabolic rate, and the process is known as thermoregulation. So there are two kinds. You've got endotherms and ectotherms. Endotherms have a constant body temperature. It's internally regulated. Mammals are a good example of this, and we use a negative feedback loop to maintain body temperature. And our body temperatures are typically warmer than our external environment. Ectotherms have a body temperature that is more strongly affected by the external environment, like plants, reptiles, amphibians, and insects. So these organisms' behavior and movements from sun to shade regulate their body temperature. There are some ecological strategies that have developed in response to energy availability and needs. So really, a net gain in energy allows an individual to experience growth and reproduction, which can lead to an increase in the size of population. A net loss of energy results in loss of growth and reproduction, which can lead to death of an individual and a decline of a population. Energy needs differ depending on whether an organism is an endotherm or an ectotherm. So we compare the needs by measuring the metabolic rate, which is the number of calories that an organism burns over time while at rest. So because endotherms maintain a constant body temperature that is typically higher than their outside environment, they typically have a higher metabolic rate than ectotherms, and therefore endotherms have higher energy requirements to feed their higher metabolic rate. They can remain active over a wide range of different environments in order to eat a lot more food to provide this energy. So that is a benefit there. So the largest animals, as we could see here on our graph, have the lowest metabolic rate on a per kilogram basis. So elephants are really large, so they really don't need to eat as much as a rat or ground squirrel or shrew or all of that compared to their body mass. Okay, so an organism increases as an organism increases in size, its volume increases rapidly while its surface area increases slowly. We've gone over this. So as a result, larger bodies have a smaller surface area relative to their volume. So they lose heat to the environment more slowly and therefore need less energy on a per kilogram basis. So larger animals require more total food overall. They require less food per kilogram of mass compared to smaller organisms. Also, the amount of energy available will determine reproductive strategies of different organisms. So many species of plants flower in the spring when rising temperatures warm the air and soil and more hours of sunlight are available so that they can generate sugars through photosynthesis. Other species evolved to initially put all of their growth throughout the spring and summer, and then they flower in the fall once they've accumulated sufficient energy to make fruits and flowers. Some plants take years to flower. The corpse flower that we talked about in the last section of notes takes 7 to 10 years to bloom. I moved into my house 3 years ago and I planted a lilac bush, and I have never gotten flowers on that bush yet. So I'm hoping this year will be the year. We shall see. It's had 3 years to grow and get that energy. Animals also time their reproduction to energy availability. So example, large mammals breed in the fall, so their offspring are born in the spring when food is therefore abundant. Some organisms need to obtain energy, but they don't have access to sunlight. So some organisms obtain energy from chemicals. So that's called as chemiosynthesis. So an example of this would be deep in the deep ocean, the hydrothermal vents. I'm sure I've mentioned these before in class, but there's sunlight doesn't reach down into the depths of the ocean. So there are these vents that release hydrogen sulfide gas. So these bacteria that have evolved to live here use the energy in the chemical bonds of the hydrogen sulfide to power the conversion of carbon dioxide and water into sugars. So that brings us then to trophic levels and food chains. You guys know what autotrophs and heterotrophs are. You know that heterotrophs could therefore be broken down into primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. We know that autotrophs and heterotrophs can be organized into successive levels, which we call trophic levels. And based on these levels, we can draw food chains and depict the direction of energy and matter flow between those trophic levels. So here we have a image over here. Okay, so we see that the primary producers down here are grasses in these trophic levels, and then we see that those grasses will be consumed by the mice. The mice will be consumed by the snakes, and the snakes will be consumed by the hawks. So we could see here the trophic levels 1, 2, 3, 4. We see primary producer, herbivore, predator or secondary consumer, and predator, tertiary consumer. Some communities have 3 trophic levels, others have 4. The transfer of energy between trophic levels is never going to be 100%. Only 10% of the mass from the primary consumers is going to be transferred to the secondary consumers. So this means that of all the energy available in the producer level, only 1% actually makes it to the secondary consumer level. So while a 10% ecological efficiency is a helpful rule of thumb, actual measurements of ecological efficiency generally range from 5 to 20%. So we just go with the 10 there. So therefore, there is a limit to how many trophic levels can exist in a community. You're not going to really get above 4 because at that point, the energy available for transfer is very minimal. So where a food chain will show the successive levels, as we saw on this slide, we see here, okay, food webs depict many interactions between species in an environment. So it's many food chains. So we could see, because one food chain by itself doesn't really depict everything that's going on in the environment. We could have certain individuals having several predators or certain individuals eating several food sources. So a food web will show more species interactions, and the arrows in the food web indicate the direction of energy movement. Matter will cycle through the environment. Most of the energy that flows through communities and ecosystems originates with the sun and is captured through photosynthesis. As the energy moves through the food web, much of it is converted into heat, and this heat is ultimately lost to space. So energy comes into an ecosystem, moves through an ecosystem, and eventually will leave that ecosystem. And matter cycles with an ecosystem as well. So matter includes many important elements that cycle through the air, water, soil, and organisms, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and carbon. So the carbon cycle is where we're going with this. The carbon, as we know, is a very important element that is found in a wide variety of molecules on Earth, including the macromolecules that make up our cells. So carbon makes up about 20% of an organism's dry mass. In the carbon cycle, we see that carbon moves between pools. These pools could be in the air, water, and land, and that carbon can move using several processes, which are all listed below. So we have exchange, sedimentation, burial, extraction, combustion. So each of these are explained here. Humans obviously have a huge impact on the carbon cycle. We've disrupted it. Without humans, the amount of carbon moved among pools by one process is approximately offset by some other processes. Human activity has altered the natural balance. So, for example, the large-scale combustion of fossil fuels by humans is a relatively recent activity, growing rapidly only during the past 2 centuries since the Industrial Revolution. So today, we contribute a large amount of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels, and that will obviously alter the environment. Logging forests has also been a component of converting the amount of carbon that was locked up in the bodies of the trees into carbon dioxide that was sent into the atmosphere. That concludes section 2. I hope that you learned a lot, and thank you for watching.